All ending here, his knees gave out, and he collapsed to the dirt, breathing in shallow, panicked gasps. It made sense now. The creature on the raft wasn't random. It didn't save sailors. It delivered them here, fed this island, fed whatever. Ancient, terrible force slept beneath the trees. Jonas wiped his mouth and staggered upright. He had to keep moving, couldn't stay here. The air around the bone field felt heavy, charged, as if 1,000 invisible eyes were watching. Waiting, he turned away from the clearing, blindly crashing through the undergrowth. The forest seemed to grow darker, denser. Branches clawed at his skin. Roots tripped his battered feet. Everywhere he looked, he saw signs, tatters of sailcloth snagged on thorns, rusting scraps of metal, broken weapons, bones, always bones. It wasn't just recent either. Some of the remains were ancient, almost fossilized. Others were fresh enough to still wear tatters of modern clothing. How many had been brought here? How many had tried to escape? Jonas didn't want to know the answer. Night fell quickly, or maybe it just grew darker, the forest swallowing the last traces of daylight. The sounds changed too. The shrieking insects went silent. The wind died. The trees stood still, and from somewhere deep within the woods came a soft, rhythmic drumming. Thump, thump, thump. Jonas froze. It wasn't human. It wasn't mechanical. It was like a heartbeat, huge, slow, ancient, coming closer. He backed away, stumbling through the blackness. He had to find shelter, had to hide. He spotted a hollow beneath the roots of a massive fallen tree, barely big enough for him to crawl into. He scrambled inside, heart hammering against his ribs, and just in time. Shapes moved through the trees. Not human, not fully, tall, gaunt figures. Their skin stretched thin over impossibly long limbs. Their faces were featureless, masks of bone. Their hands ended in clawed fingers, dragging along the ground as they walked. They didn't make a sound, didn't speak, just moved in an eerie, synchronized rhythm, as if answering the pulse that beat from the heart of the island itself. Jonas clamped a hand over his mouth, forcing himself to stay silent. One of the creatures paused near his hiding spot, its head cocked to the side, as if listening. Jonas squeezed his eyes shut. Seconds passed like hours. Finally, the creature moved on, following the others. The thumping. Heartbeat faded into the distance. Jonas waited long after the sounds had vanished, too terrified to move. Eventually, exhaustion overtook fear. He slept. A shallow, haunted sleep filled with nightmares of drowning, burning, and hollow-eyed figures, pulling him down into the earth. When he woke, it was still dark. Or maybe the forest was just so dense that no light could penetrate. He crawled out from beneath the tree roots. His throat felt like it was lined with sandpaper. His stomach twisted painfully. He needed water, badly, and he needed to get off this island. But how? No raft, no ship, nothing but endless trees and bones. Still, he couldn't just sit there and die. He picked a direction at random and started walking. The forest seemed to close in tighter around him. The air grew colder, wetter. Soon he heard the trickle of water. Stream. He stumbled toward it, nearly sobbing with relief. The water was brackish but drinkable. He drank until his stomach ached, then splashed some over his cracked skin, cooling the fever burning through him. He sat back, gasping, and that's when he saw it, across the stream, half hidden in the undergrowth. A building, ruined, crumbling, covered in vines, but unmistakably. Human-made hope flared painfully in Jonas's chest. Maybe it was a station, a radio outpost, something, anything. He splashed across the stream, ignoring the cold soaking into his bones. The building was made of stone, old and cracked. A single doorway yawned open like a mouth. He hesitated. Something about it felt wrong. If the darkness inside was deeper, hungrier than the forest around it. But what choice did he have? He stepped inside. The air was thick, heavy with mildew and rot. The room was empty except for a massive stone slab in the center. Carvings covered it, strange, looping symbols Jonas didn't recognize. Atop the slab, laid out with terrible care, was a skeleton. Not ancient like the ones outside. This one was recent, still wearing the ragged remains of a modern survival suit, and clutched in its bony hands a book, a journal. Jonas approached cautiously. The skeleton didn't move, couldn't move. He pried the book from its grip. The cover was warped and stained, but some of the pages were still legible. He flipped through them, scanning the scrawled handwriting. The words chilled him to the marrow. The raft brings us here. The island feeds on survivors. The watchers choose who lives and who dies. No escape, only the offering. Jonas's hands trembled. He kept reading. There is a boat, hidden at the cliffs on the far side of the island. But it will not be easy. They will come. They always come. Jonas slammed the book shut. A boat, a chance, if he could reach it, if he could survive long enough. He tucked the journal under his arm and turned to leave, but standing in the doorway were the watchers. 3 of them, silent, immobile, blocking his only exit. And in the darkness behind them, the heartbeat began again, louder this time, faster, as if the island itself had awakened. Jonas backed away, heart pounding in time with the terrible rhythm. No escape, only the offering. And now it was. His turn. Jonas didn't think. He acted. A burst of pure instinct propelled him forward. He hurled the journal at the watchers. The book struck the nearest one squarely in its hollow chest, and to Jonas's surprise, it staggered back a step. Not much, but enough. Jonas ran. He ducked under a skeletal arm and bolted into the forest. His lungs burning, his vision blurred by terror. Behind him, the watchers moved. Not running, not shouting, just gliding, effortless, inevitable. Jonas tore through the undergrowth, thorns slashing at his skin, branches whipping his face. He didn't care. He couldn't afford to care. All that mattered was putting as much distance as possible between himself and the slab, the skeleton, the things that waited there in the dark. His mind replayed the journal's words again and again. Hidden at the cliffs on the far side of the island. There is a boat. The cliffs. Find the cliffs. The trees thinned out slightly as he ran, the ground beginning to slope upward. Good. Cliffs meant elevation. Elevation meant a view, a way to find the coast and the boat. But the terrain was treacherous, loose. Stones shifted under his feet, roots clawed from the earth like skeletal fingers. Every few steps he stumbled, scraping his hands raw as he caught himself. Behind him, the heartbeat grew louder. Thump, thump, thump. And now, worse, there were whispers. Soft, sibilant voices threading through the trees, calling his name, Jonas. He didn't look back. Couldn't. Somehow he knew if he saw them, really saw them, it would be over. They would own him. He crested a ridge and saw it. The cliffs. Jagged, black rock, plunging down into a churning grey sea. Waves smashed against the stone far below, sending up plumes of spray. No sign of the boat yet, but he was close. Jonas forced his aching legs to move faster, scrambling down the rocky slope toward the cliff's edge. The trees thinned further, replaced by stunted, salt-bleached shrubs. And then he saw it. A narrow path carved into the side of the cliff, barely visible. Dangerous, crumbly, but leading. Downward, leading toward a small cove mostly hidden from view, and in that cove, yes, oh God, yes, a boat. It wasn't much. A battered inflatable raft, half deflated, tied hastily to a rusted iron ring set into the rock. But it was a way off the island, his salvation, if he could reach it. Jonas took a step toward the path and froze. Something moved below him. Not the watchers, something bigger, something worse. From the surf, black shapes began to rise. At first, they looked like seaweed, drifting up from the depths. But then he saw arms, hands, faces, dozens of them, emaciated figures dripping salt water, their mouths yawning open in soundless moans. Their eyes were gone, just hollow sockets leaking black seawater. They pulled themselves up the rocks with broken fingers, clawing toward the cove, toward the boat, cutting off his only escape. Jonas spun around, searching for another way down. Nothing, no other path. And the watchers were behind him now at the tree line, still not rushing, still giving him time, as if the island itself was savoring this, milking his terror. Jonas took a deep breath and jumped. He half fell, half slid down the rocky slope, stones tearing into his skin. He hit the narrow path hard, almost losing his balance. The impact sent shocks of pain through his body, but he didn't stop. Couldn't. The drowned things were almost at the raft. He sprinted along the crumbling ledge, feet slipping dangerously close to the edge. Rocks tumbled away into the surf below. He didn't dare look down. One misstep and he'd be dashed against the rocks like a broken doll. The nearest drowned man saw him and let out a gurgling hiss. It flailed up toward the path, reaching with skeletal fingers. Jonas leapt over it, heart slamming against his ribs. The raft was just ahead now, bobbing weakly in the rough surf. He could see the rope tying it to the rock, almost there, almost. A hand snagged his ankle. Jonas screamed and fell hard, smashing his chin against the stone. Blood filled his mouth. The drowned thing clung to him, with impossible strength, dragging him toward the edge. Saltwater eyes stared up at him, empty and endless. Jonas kicked wildly, trying to dislodge it, his boot connected with the thing's face, caving in the soft, rotted bone. It didn't let go. More hands reached for him now, clawing up over the edge. Jonas grabbed a jagged rock and swung it down savagely, again and again. Bone splintered. Black fluid sprayed. The hand finally loosened. He scrambled upright and ran the last few steps to the raft. The rope was thick and knotted. No time to untie it properly. He yanked a rusted hunting knife from the raft's supply bag, left there, maybe by whoever had hidden the boat, and sawed through the rope desperately. The drowned things shrieked behind him, a sound like seagulls and broken glass. The knife bit through the rope. The raft bobbed free. Jonas hurled himself into it just as the first drowned thing reached the ledge. It plunged after him with a shriek of rage, missed, hit the rocks below with a sickening crunch. The others hesitated. Maybe too afraid of the open sea, maybe bound to the island somehow. Jonas didn't wait to find out. He grabbed the paddle stashed in the raft and started rowing with everything he had. The raft lurched and swayed, threatening to capsize with every wave. But it moved. It moved. The island began to recede. The cliffs, the forest, the terrible waiting watchers, all shrinking behind him. He didn't stop paddling until his arms gave out. He collapsed against the raft's side. Gasping, crying, laughing all at once. He was free. He had made it. Somehow, against every possible odd, he had survived. The sun was rising now, staining the sky a pale gold. Jonas watched it, tears streaming down his salt-crusted face. He drifted. Hours passed, maybe more. He lost track of time. Eventually he saw a dark shape on the horizon, a ship, a real ship, a fishing trawler, by the look of it. Hope flared anew. He screamed, waved his arms, anything to get their attention. The ship altered course, came closer. He saw figures on the deck, pointing. A lifeboat was lowered into the water. Jonas laughed hysterically. They were incoming for him. He was saved. The lifeboat approached. Two men in orange suits leaned over the edge, grabbing him, hauling him aboard. He slumped into their arms, too weak to speak. They spoke in a language he didn't recognize. Maybe Portuguese or Spanish, but their faces were kind, their hands gentle, safe. Finally, Safe, they ferried him back to the ship. More hands lifted him up, blankets, water, words he barely heard. He tried to thank them, tried to explain, but his throat wouldn't work. Didn't matter. He was safe. They carried him below deck, into a small, clean bunk room. Jonas curled up on the thin mattress, trembling. He was so tired, so tired. The crew bustled around him, checking his pulse, bringing him water and a bowl of something hot and savory. He managed a few sips before sleep claimed him. For the first time in days, maybe weeks, he slept deeply. No nightmares, no heartbeat in the dark, just blessed, empty sleep. But somewhere, in the deepest part of his mind, a memory stirred, a warning, a line from the journal, half forgotten. The raft brings us here. It does not let us leave. Jonas stirred, frowning in his sleep, and in the darkness of the bunk room, unseen by anyone, a single drop of black seawater fell from his nose onto the clean white sheets. It spread, it grew, it whispered. The island wasn't done with him yet. Not by a long shot. The ship's engines thrummed steadily beneath Jonas, a low, comforting vibration that lulled him into half-consciousness. Outside, he heard the crew moving about, their voices blending with the rhythmic slap of waves against the hull. Safe, real, normal, or at least it should have been. Jonas shifted, under the rough blanket, trying to ignore the strange coldness creeping through his bones. He opened his eyes. The bunk room was dim, lit only by a weak, swinging bulb. The shadows it cast seemed to move a little too much, dancing along the walls, in patterns that made his skin crawl. He sat up slowly. The room spun around him for a moment. Before settling, Jonas's hand brushed the sheets. Wet. He frowned and lifted his fingers to his face. A black smear glistened on his skin, thick and oily. Seawater, but not normal seawater. This was darker, heavier, almost alive. It clung to him, refusing to drip away. Jonas's heart thudded painfully in his chest. The warning from the journal echoed louder in his mind now. It does not let us leave. He stood, stumbling slightly, and crossed to the small mirror bolted to the wall. His reflection stared back at him, gaunt, bloodshot eyes sunk deep into a pale, salt-burned face. But there was something else, something moving just beneath the surface of his skin. Jonas leaned closer. The black water traced thin lines along his veins, like ink spreading through paper, wriggling, pulsing, changing him. He staggered back from the mirror, bile rising in his throat. "No," he rasped. "No, no, no." The door to the bunk room creaked open. One of the sailors poked his head inside, a stocky man with sun-darkened skin and a tangled beard. He smiled warmly when he saw Jonas awake, speaking rapid Portuguese. Jonas shook his head, trying to explain without words that he didn't understand. The sailor gestured for him to follow, unsteady but desperate to cling to some version of normality. Jonas obeyed. He was led up a narrow metal staircase onto the deck. Blinding sunlight hit him like a slap. The sea stretched out in every direction, endless, empty blue. Jonas squinted. He didn't recognize the ship's design, but it looked sturdy, a working vessel, nets bundled along the sides, rusted cranes swinging slightly with the ship's motion. Several sailors milled about, glancing at him. Curiously, but without suspicion, he realized they must have found other castaways before, maybe not often, but enough that he wasn't a complete anomaly. For a few fragile minutes, Jonas allowed himself to believe it might be okay. That whatever infection or curse or parasite the island had left inside him could be fixed, that he was really, truly free. Then he saw the water. Near the bow, two sailors were shouting, pointing over the side. Jonas shuffled closer, heart hammering. The sea directly beside the ship was wrong. It churned, dark and oily, swirling in a widening vortex. No natural current made that shape. It was as if something massive and unseen was circling below. Jonas's legs weakened. The sailors threw objects overboard, heavy fishing gear, crates, anything they could find, trying to distract whatever it was. The water swallowed each item greedily, dragging it down into the depths. Jonas backed away. The black lines under his skin burned hotter now, pulsing in time with the vortex. It wanted him. It was calling him. A voice rose from the depths, soft and terrible. "Come home." Jonas clamped his hands over his ears. It didn't help. The voice wasn't in the air. It was inside his mind, threading through his thoughts like vines. One of the sailors shouted at him, concerned. Jonas tried to answer, to warn them. But when he opened his mouth, only seawater poured out. Thick, black seawater. The sailors recoiled in horror. One crossed himself. Another reached for a length of rope, as if planning to tie Jonas down. Jonas stumbled backward, terrified of what he was becoming. He turned and ran across the deck, slipping on wet metal, barely keeping his footing. The ship's captain, a tall woman with sharp eyes and a pistol at her hip, emerged from the bridge, barking orders. Jonas saw her gesture sharply toward him. The crew began to close in. Jonas didn't blame them. He wasn't safe. Not for them, not for anyone. He staggered. Toward the stern, toward the lifeboats. Maybe if he got away, he could draw whatever was following him away from the ship. Save them. He fumbled with the release lever for one of the lifeboats, a hard plastic capsule bobbing on the waves below. It stuck. He wrenched at it, panic flooding him. The crew was almost on him. Then a horrible sound split the air, a deep, groaning crack, like the earth itself breaking apart. The deck shuddered violently. Everyone froze. Jonas turned, heart pounding. The vortex beside the ship had widened. From its center, something vast was rising. At first, Jonas thought it was a whale. But no animal wore a face like that. A mask of bone and seaweed, stitched together with ropes of kelp and flesh. Eyes, hundreds of them, glimmered wetly along its flanks, blinking in sick, asynchronous patterns. Tentacles coiled up from the water, thicker than telephone poles, dripping black ichor. The watchers, the drowned, all of them, part of this thing, born from it. Jonas understood now. The island wasn't just a place, it was alive, it was a god, and he had carried a piece of it away, a seed planted inside him. The creature's voice filled his mind again. "Come home." The crew screamed. Guns fired, uselessly, at the rising monstrosity. Jonas pulled with all his remaining strength on the lifeboat lever. It snapped free. The small craft dropped into the sea with a splash. Jonas didn't hesitate. He leapt, fell, hit. The water hard. Pain blossomed in every nerve. The black seawater welcomed him like an old friend. He surfaced, coughing and gasping, and hauled himself into the lifeboat. The capsule was designed to seal, a storm shelter. But Jonas left the hatch open for a moment, watching the ship. The sailors fought bravely, but it was useless. Tentacles lashed the ship's hull, cracking metal like paper. One by one, the crew was dragged screaming into the sea. The ship groaned and tilted, its stern rising out of the water. Jonas caught a glimpse of the captain, pistol in hand, firing until the last moment, before the ship vanished beneath the waves. Swallowed whole, gone. Jonas slammed the hatch shut just as a massive wave tossed the lifeboat like a toy. Inside the capsule, he clung to the safety straps, the world pitching and rolling violently. The creature circled him, waiting. It didn't attack. It didn't need to. He was already marked, already changing. Hours passed, or days. Time meant nothing inside the endless, grey world. The black lines beneath Jonas's skin grew thicker, branching like roots. He no longer needed to eat, or drink, or sleep. The sea sang to him, sweet and terrible, telling him secrets, telling him what he was becoming. Eventually, the waters calmed. The lifeboat bumped against something solid. Jonas unlatched the hatch and climbed out. Mist drifted over the water. Through it he saw the shoreline, an island, not the same one, not exactly, but close enough. The trees leaned at unnatural angles. The rocks whispered. The very ground breathed. Home. He understood now. There was no escape. Not really. The sea was the island. The island was the sea. It wore many faces, many shores, but it was all the same hunger. Jonas stepped into the surf. Black. Water dripped from his fingers. His eyes, once green, were now empty hollows, leaking endless tears of the deep. He walked onto the beach. Behind him the lifeboat slowly dissolved into black sludge, sinking into the sand. Waiting. Soon another ship would come. More people would find the raft. More seeds would spread. It had always been this way. It always would be. Jonas smiled, a cracked, broken thing, and disappeared into the mist. The sea was calm that morning. The sky stretched wide and pale, a thin mist lying low over the water, muting the colors of the world. Captain Elaine Torres adjusted her binoculars, scanning the vast empty horizon. Nothing, only the endless sigh of waves, the distant cries of gulls. Her ship, the Maribel, moved steadily through the morning haze, part of a scheduled patrol run. In theory, they were checking for illegal fishing, operations, debris, maybe even assisting in the rare case of a distressed vessel. In truth, Elaine knew most patrols were quiet, hours of empty ocean. It was almost enough to make her dismiss the call, almost. The Coast Guard had logged a brief, broken transmission late last night, a distress ping from an unidentified craft somewhere in this sector. No name, no identification, just a raw signal, like something automated, triggered by old damage. Elaine didn't like ghosts, but she liked leaving them behind even less. "Anything yet?" she asked her first mate, a wiry man named Connor. He shook his head. "Nothing but birds and salt," Elaine nodded grimly. They were about to turn back when she saw it, a dark shape bobbing on the waves, maybe half a mile ahead. "Port side!" she barked, and the crew sprang into action. They pulled closer, throttling down as the object became clearer. A raft, or what had once been one. Elaine frowned. It wasn't the bright orange standard issue for modern lifeboats. This thing looked ancient, a shell of hardened resin cracked with age. Stained black by seawater, worse, it was half sunken, listing heavily in the swell. Rotten, broken, cursed, her mind whispered. She shook the thought away. "Launch the skiff," she ordered. Within minutes, she and two crewmen were lowering themselves into the smaller motorboat and approaching the raft. The smell hit them first, a thick, greasy reek of decay and salt. Elaine gagged, but pressed forward. She didn't want to leave some poor castaway, or their remains, to rot forgotten. They reached the raft. The surface was covered in scratches. Deep gouges crisscrossed the interior, as if someone had clawed at the walls. A black residue oozed from the seams. Elaine felt her skin crawl just looking at it. One of the crewmen, Davis, hooked the raft with a pole and pulled it closer. Something clinked inside. Elaine peered through. The open hatch, empty. No bodies, no signs of life. Just a battered, waterlogged satchel wedged in a corner. She exchanged a look with Davis. Neither wanted to be the one to reach in. With a muttered curse, Elaine grabbed the pole, hooked the strap of the satchel, and lifted it carefully out. It was heavier than she expected. Water dripped from it in slow, black rivulets. She set it in the bottom of the skiff and motioned them to head back. Something about the raft, about the oily water leaking from it, made her stomach twist with an instinct older than reason. Get away. Now. Back aboard the Maribel. Elaine carried the satchel to the deck, where sunlight could fully illuminate it. She hesitated only a moment before unzipping it. Inside, miraculously preserved by layers of thick plastic wrapping, was a camera. A heavy-duty waterproof model, scratched but intact. Elaine glanced at Connor. He nodded, understanding immediately they needed to see what was on it. The crew gathered around a small table in the ship's mess as Elaine connected the camera to a laptop. The screen flickered to life. There were dozens of files, short video clips. Elaine clicked on the first. The image was jerky, handheld. A man's face filled the frame, hollow-eyed, unshaven, desperate. Elaine felt an immediate jolt of pity. "Name's Jonas Merrick," he said hoarsely. "If anyone finds this..." "I was on a solo trip, trying to map part of the uncharted island south of here," he swallowed, glancing over his shoulder at something unseen. "I don't know where I am now. I shouldn't be alive. But something..." He broke off, shuddering. "It's following me." The screen cut to static. Elaine clicked the next file. Jonas again, but worse. His skin looked waxy, his eyes glassy. He was whispering frantically. "It's not an island. It's a mouth in the earth." Another video. The camera shook violently, the image swinging wildly. Branches, dark shapes between them. A sound. A deep, rhythmic thudding filled the audio, almost subliminal, like a giant heartbeat. Jonas's breathing was ragged, panicked. "It's under my skin," he gasped. "It's inside me." The footage cut off with a high-pitched shriek that made Elaine flinch. The next file was longer. Jonas sitting in the raft, drifting, speaking in broken sentences. 4 days, no water, but not thirsty. Feel them singing in the waves." In the background, mist swirled over the ocean's surface. Shapes moved in the mist. At first, Elaine thought it was tricks of the light. But then one of the shapes leaned closer. A hand, long and bony, webbed with black veins, pressed against the raft's porthole. Jonas didn't even react. He just stared straight ahead, hollow, like he'd already given up. Another clip. Jonas filmed himself in the dark. "Don't trust them," he whispered. "Even if they look human," his face twisted in terror. "They wear your memories like clothes." The final video. The raft was half-flooded now. Jonas sat curled in a corner, his body shivering violently. He turned the camera on himself one last time. His mouth opened. Black seawater poured out, spilling down his chest, steaming in the cold air. He tried to speak, but no words came. Only the sea, only the endless, whispering sea. The video cut out. Silence fell over the mess hall. No one spoke. Elaine stared at the frozen image on the screen. Jonas's face, distorted in terror and resignation. The laptop suddenly flickered. The screen went black. The camera sparked and died, smoke curling up from its ruined circuits. Elaine swore and unplugged it hastily. The crew dispersed slowly, unsettled. No one wanted to admit they were scared. Elaine sat alone for a long moment, breathing shallowly. In the corner of her vision, something moved. She turned sharply. Nothing there, only the shadows stretching longer across the deck, only the faint, almost imperceptible sound of the waves. No, not the waves, whispers, calling her. Elaine stood, heart hammering. She needed to radio it in, report the raft, the footage, the potential biological hazard, anything to make it official, make it real, so it couldn't claw at the edges of her mind like a living thing. She hurried to the communications room. The equipment hummed with static. She reached for the mic, paused. In the reflection of the window, she saw herself. But something was wrong. Her reflection smiled. She hadn't. The radio crackled. A voice, wet and gurgling, slid through the static. "Come home." Elaine turned and ran. But there was nowhere left to go. Out in the ocean, in the mist, dozens of figures waited. Not men, not fish. Something in between. Watching, smiling, patient. The Maribel's engines failed that night. Her lights flickered out. The patrol was never heard from again. Weeks later, another ship would find her drifting, empty, only a faint trail of black water staining her decks, and somewhere, deep beneath the waves, the island slept and waited and dreamed of more.